Hello, dear listeners, and welcome to the VVA Podcast. My name is Leila Oresme.
And I'm Cristina Tumino.
And today's episode is episode number 11, entitled, What is Justice?
Yes, so on this episode, we would like to understand what is justice. So as we used to do, we went to look up the definition of justice, and that is the quality of being just. So the condition of being morally correct or fair. And we were actually trying to understand, how can we be just in some way? What does it even mean? And and for that reason, we went to go as well a bit deeper and going to look for the etymological meaning. And that is the exercise of authority in vindication of right by assigning reward or punishment. And in terms of from Latin, it actually means righteousness and equity.
I think equity is an interesting word here, right? And I think maybe in order to understand that deeper, we actually have to look at the difference between equality and equity.
Yes, I actually completely agree. Equity and equality is actually something that nowadays people talk a lot about and how they think. So maybe to explain better for those maybe that don't know, don't have it clear. So equality is just simply giving everyone, when everybody's treated in the same exact way. So they're all given everything, the same kind of resources, regardless of their needs or regardless of their abilities. So if somebody, I don't know if you've seen those pictures where somebody watching a match in the stadium, and there is this one short and one tall, and the tall can actually see beyond the fence and the short one cannot see. So that will be equality. Well, equity is when you differentiate the resources, so then in some way the outcome is different. So if you are short, you will be given these kind of steps or something, so you can reach and watch the match. And if you're tall, you don't need the steps. So that is the main kind of difference. But
basically, just to kind of give a clearer picture for those who haven't actually seen it. So equality is giving everyone the same things and treating everyone equally, whereas equity is more focused on equality of outcome, meaning that everyone has to get the same regardless of who they are or what they have actually done in order to receive or to get to that outcome. So equity is all about equality of outcome.
Yeah. So I think actually this is a problem in reality. Although it sounds like, oh, wow, this is amazing, we all need to be then, we used to have use equity. I actually think that's wrong, because the importance is not the outcome. Because how do we know what should be the real outcome in reality? So if it's when in a place, in a workplace, they say, oh, we want to give the opportunity to everyone to come and work for us. So we need to have a certain amount of, for instance, Black people, etc., etc. But the problem is that we're not really considering what naturally has been kind of given to us as human beings. It's the outcome is based on sameness, if we are all the same in some way. So it's not about our uniqueness. It's considering we need to have at least some Black people, some people with disabilities, some people that are just, I don't know, white people or whatever. So we're already choosing what we think is fair and distributed to give opportunities. But the problem is that we're considering everybody in some way, we're considering them as to be the same. Although it sounds like a paradox, because you're thinking, but you're thinking one is Black, you're thinking one is disabled, you're thinking one is, but who says that there will be a disabled person that actually will be good for your company to perform that specific task? How do you know? Of course, in the world, there will be maybe at some point one person. But the whole point is that we're actually treating everybody as if they were the same. While instead we're all unique. So Maybe I can give another example to explain myself better, because supporting uniqueness. So if, for instance, I think in terms of opportunities, because what we want to at the end is to achieve equal opportunities, like to all have the opportunity to do what we want. But by using equity, we're not really doing that. Because if you are a person that, for instance, naturally we're being gifted with a specific unique talent, yeah, so God is the one that gives us that specific kind of equality, in terms of like, we all have the same resources when we are born. We all have our unique skills, and that is our opportunity for life. So if, for instance, my skill is to be an amazing surgeon, yeah, so that's my skill. And I'm very passionate about it, and I know myself, and I work on myself, and then I carry on in my career, and then I get to this hospital or clinic where I can go and do this as a job, and then they tell me, no, excuse me, I cannot accept you because I need to get a Black person now. And maybe the Black person, because they didn't really know himself or herself, just did this job because dad was a surgeon, and did it just because of money or whatever was the reason, and he's not that passionate and that good as the other person. In that case, we're actually not being just. We're not giving the person what the person deserves, if it makes sense.
Exactly. And also another thing about that is that if that person is not very good at being a surgeon, then they are very likely to be great at something else. And when we give them the job which they do not deserve, we take them further and further away from their own unique destiny that they are supposed to be living out. And also another way to kind of think about this equity stuff is that we are actually putting a limit on something that should be limitless. Because if we have a cap of this kind of norm where everyone has to achieve the same, then what about the extra excellent people who can surpass that, ordinary level, and actually, are geniuses and can actually bring so much value to the world by being so excellent? And through equity, we are capping them at this ordinary level because we need to bring everyone else to, just even the whole thing out. And that's not how life works. We need excellence. We need all these unique individuals that no one can replace, and because the fact is that, people are not equal. People are equally, important, but not everyone is equal in, their abilities and the contribution they can bring to the world. And this is a fact that many people struggle to accept. There are some people who are at a certain evolution of their soul and in their life where they cannot bring the same amount of value as someone else who is higher. Because now there is this idea that everyone is the same, everyone is perfect, everyone matters. But the truth is that some people can just bring more value than others because they have worked harder than the others. It's just how it is. And if we do not accept that, then we are literally capping the whole world, at this kind of like funny, ordinary limit where the excellent people are not getting their chance to be excellent.
Yeah. And I agree. It's like, and that's why, for instance, I remember once listening to one of Jordan Peterson's videos where I think he was talking about this topic, where he was saying, well, if you break your bones or something, well, who would you like to go to see? A doctor that is passionate and is excellent? Or would you like to go to just a doctor that is there maybe because you needed to be there? So like, it makes a huge difference. The same is with an artist, the same is with everyone. And this starts actually from school, from when you are young. I remember when I was at school, there was a new art teacher, and I always loved maths and arts. Like, I'm being always like very passionate about both. And I remember this new art teacher, she saw that I was good at doing things with like wood and like polystyrene and cutting and making things. So for Christmas, we were going to prepare something that we never done, and like in that school where I was studying. So I suggested some ideas, and she was very, she was new, she was very excited, she was quite young. So she was saying, okay, why don't we take, like she was suggesting the few children in the whole school that we were very like with ideas and, like we wanted to do something. She said, why don't you come and we spend a few days per week and we build something together. So she was talking with the other teachers, and I agreed because I was good in maths. My maths teacher said, okay, I don't mind if she goes with you in my hour once a week, because anyway I could catch up. That wasn't a problem. So I was very excited. So when the moment was, I had to go with the teacher. We were like 7-8 children building things and doing stuff. And the funny thing that happened is that the first time was okay. The second time, all the children's, like all the other students in the classroom were starting to say, but that's not fair. Why is she going and taking an hour to go and do this art thing while we are staying here? Why do we need to stay here? So they started to complain to other teachers. So the other teachers went to talk to this art teacher saying, oh, we need to do something about this because that's not fair. We need to give opportunity to everyone to go and do something for this stage. The thing is that most of these other students didn't even care about building this. So the way it ended up is that I just went twice, and other children that were very good and talented didn't go as well. So the other ones just took the hour to take a break or do nothing. So we didn't really do the stage because we couldn't make it. So can you see, to give the opportunity to everyone, you actually missed the opportunity to create something great, cool, interesting, and even for us to learn more about ourselves. Because the more you create or do something, the more you learn what you're able to do. So it was actually taking away the opportunity to the people that deserved or could have used it to give it, to be fair and give it to everyone. It doesn't even make sense.
I think there is a problem in that, isn't there? Because we are kind of used to this idea of kind of a human-made justice, which is fabricated by human beings. So here we are talking about certain laws that are set in place in order to stop, bad things from happening and injustice happening within the society. But the problem is that even though we need such laws, we have to look at each case uniquely, because every person is unique, every situation is unique, and we cannot apply just plain rules to every single situation, because that way we miss out on all the important detail. And essentially, it's Plato talks about the human justice versus divine justice. So human justice is what I've just talked about, but then we have divine justice, which is something that only God knows. Only God sees the bigger picture, and only God can judge us. So human beings are actually not qualified to judge anybody, because we do not know the whole spectrum of events that occurred in a person's life in order for us to judge whether they are a good human or not. And maybe it's not just one single lifetime that is being taken into consideration, but a number of lifetimes. So only God can see the progress of the soul, and only God will know what the soul deserves.
And what is just and what is not. Because Plato, he says, when he talks about justice, and he says that justice is a virtue, he actually says that in one of his dialogues in the Republic book, he actually says that being just is not necessarily, like a man that is just is not necessarily a wise man or a good man, because he doesn't explicitly talk about human justice, but that's what it is. Like us, we are like the many. We have imperfect ways of perceived justice, but what we cannot have the ability to really be like justice, like just injustice itself, because that's divine, has nothing to do with us. So when you and an example can be that when we try to be just according to our understanding, so in order to be just, you have to have the knowledge, you need to know what is the truth to understand what to be punished and not to be punished in some way. So how can we know the truth? How can we have that knowledge if in reality we know to know nothing? Because that's the truth. Like, it's when you, like, you need, I don't know if you've seen those pictures when you see like the number 6 and there are two people watching a number 6 from two opposite views. So for me it's a 6 and it is a 6, but if the other person looks from the other perspective, it's a 9. And in reality, none of them are actually lying, but none of them are saying completely the full picture, the full truth. So we can never be properly just. And we can see this even from, like, I don't know, it's like human justice can never be objective, totally objective. So for instance, when you make a law, although, like, I remember, I like what was the name, Dr. Walter William, that he's an American economist. He said that the only kind of equality, when we were talking about equality, is the one that we can have before the law. Like, yeah, but even though the law is made by men, so if, for instance, what was considered by law, of course I'm going to use now a very extreme example, but it's valid, when Nazis were using as a law the fact that you needed to persecute like Jewish people, and actually they were sent to camps, concentration camps, that was the law. So if you didn't adhere to the law, you were the one that were going to be persecuted. You were not just. So that is a proof that we can never really be completely just, because we don't know. This has to do with something that is way bigger than us. And Plato as well talks about the just soul. I know we talked about this in the past in other videos, a just soul and the just city. So the only kind of justice we can focus on, and that's what Jordan Peterson kind of mentioned, this Dr. William, Walter William was mentioned, and others as well, is the fact that we can just need to focus on us and understand and be kind of understand who we are and what is our opportunity, the gifted opportunity we have, and talents that we're being gifted with, and when you know that and you can put everything in the right place, then is when you can be just. But it comes from within, and that within is actually comes from the divine, from God. So that is the only way to kind of be just.
And actually also in the Old Testament, we have the 10 Commandments that come to Moses from God. They come directly to him from God. So it wasn't something that he made up. It was something that he received from God. And that was kind of the start of, the human law, which was based on these divine principles, right? So the 10 Commandments were divine, and then further laws were kind of shaped all around that. So it was like also people's interpretations, which meant that as it kind of evolved, it became corrupted by power. So the essential thing wasn't the kind of rules for life per se, in a way where, if you don't do these, there will be consequences. It became a sort of way to control people and to get seek power, basically, through putting more laws and avoiding certain consequences for certain people. But essentially the idea is that when we do bad things or good things, there is always a consequence. There's a natural cause and effect, which means that nothing we do comes without any kind of consequence, which means we have to take responsibility for our actions, because the consequences are always there. And sometimes they may not necessarily come in a way that we expect them to. For example, we might do a certain thing and then we will pay for it, in 10 years time with, something that seems to be completely unrelated, but God knows that it is. So this is also why we cannot judge people and, make these kinds of judgments about whether someone, is living a life that they deserved. Because in reality, if we don't have something right now, that means that we have not deserved it yet. There has to be something we must do in order to get it, and nothing in life is free. Which brings me onto the idea of the law of attraction, which is very popular in the New Age community. And it seems to be the kind of core of New Age spirituality, which the spiritual aspect of law of attraction is quite questionable, in my opinion, because it doesn't take God into the equation. But that's maybe for another episode. But the idea is that basically I can, with my mind and my thoughts and my feelings, attract anything into my life. And whatever I visualize, if I do it hard enough, then it will come into my life, because I already deserve everything. If I can imagine it, that means I deserve it. And that isn't true.
Can I say something? I think what I think is important to explain that it actually happens. Like what you attract, what you want, it can happen.
Yeah,
it can. It's not that it's not true that it can happen. It can happen.
Of course.
That's the problem. That's the problem.
It can happen. And another thing is that we need to realize that in order to make this thing happen, we need to take action in order to solidify whatever we have visualized. So, I'll give you an example. Let's say I'm just lying in my bed every single day and I'm visualizing, myself in a mansion, right? But then I don't actually take any action to make money, to make connections with people that can help me get into, that particular outcome, right? So, it doesn't matter how much I visualize if I don't take any action towards it in order to actually, solidify and deserve it, then it's never going to happen. And sometimes actually it might happen by some freak of nature. It might happen, we might get it, but then what happens? We are not ready for it because we haven't deserved it. So let's say an example of people who win the lottery and they win millions of pounds. Well, there are some studies that actually show that most people who win the lottery, they end up losing that money within a few years. Some of them commit suicide. Some of them end up being depressed. And this is because they are not ready to have that much money. They haven't gone through the, experiences that actually teach them how to have money management, how to how to invest that money and actually keep it. So what they end up doing is they just end up blowing it. They just end up spending it in all the pretty unhealthy ways, and as a result, they fall into depression because they get something that they haven't deserved.
And I think as well, that completely I agree. And even if there is people, because now there's people, they're teaching how to make sure the things happen what you want. Like the very dangerous thing is that there is this idea that you can get whatever you want. Okay, so I know of people that think, okay, I want to go to this place, and they give you these tips, and you need to believe in this. You need to, for a month, you need to think about it, write it down or whatever, and then you need to work on it and try to do it. Like, for instance, I want to move into another country and I want to live in the seaside and have a beautiful place where to stay. So they said, okay, you need to commit on this. You need to think fully with all your mind, your body, everything, that you are visualizing that you're going to go there. And then you need to start to work on it. So you need to start to pack, you need to start to look for flights, you need to actually do. So in some way, there is action, yeah? But what if that is not what is there for you? That's not part of your purpose in life. That is a big problem, because you are just creating more difficulties and problem in your life. And even if it is part of your path, so in the case it's not part, you've been working hard in terms of like, oh, I'm actually selling the house, I'm actually doing everything, and I move. And then you go there, and then in reality, you have so many problems, I don't know, with the weather, or diseases that are there that you're not aware of, or whatever. I have no idea, whatever it can be. So the universe give you that, but then there is a price to pay. And maybe the price is so high that in reality it was better not to have it in the first place. And that's why self-knowledge is so important, because even when it's part of your path, so let's pretend that your path is to be a person, like a business person, yeah? So you need to work on building your business, and you're actually working on that. So you're working on building your business, you are doing all the things, so you are in the right path, and what you try to visualize is to have lots of orders. You want lots of orders, and you want to have people queuing buying your products, yeah? So that's part of your path, because that's what you need to be a businessman. And you've been working, but you are very impatient. Like you want to start to visualize, you want to say like, oh, I can't wait, I want this, and I visualize and I visualize. And then it comes. You start to have lots of people and make lots of orders, but then you don't have the ability to maintain that because you haven't growth enough to that point. And what can happen is that more people become so dissatisfied of your performance or the products you do, or you maybe cannot deliver on time, that in reality the price to pay for that visualization, for that request, is high. You actually can damage the image of your business. So that's why it's so important to learn self-knowledge, understand about your body, mind, feelings, and understand how to be in control. And like there's lots of work to do behind. So then if you're actually going to use the law of attraction, if you have to, then there is a real way to do things in the right moment, when it is. And you actually do it the moment you work anyway. The moment you're working and you're patient, things happen. You are already telling the universe and God, I am committing, I'm here. And things will arrive in the just way for what you deserve, for what the amount of commitment you put into the thing, and it will come in the right pace for what you need, you can do.
And I think also the problem is that most people use things like law of attraction in order to have shortcuts and avoid learning. But the problem is that we will learn our lessons regardless of whether we get that thing or not. So for example, we might want to, I don't know, let's say we want to manifest a certain job, right? Because we think that it has potential to get us a lot of money. So let's say we are actually those kinds of people that, we don't necessarily like to work a lot. And then let's say, we're going to manifest this crazy job and we're going to get it. We're going to get the job. But what ends up happening is that we realize how hard we actually have to work, and so the lesson of working hard is going to be learned anyway, whether you like it or not. Because if you don't end up working really hard within that job, then you will lose it. So, we can never run away from the lessons that God has for us. And ultimately, the big thing about self-knowledge is that so we know what God has actually set for us. Because if we, submit to the will of God and become who we are supposed to be, then things are easy. Well, maybe not easy, because sometimes it's difficult, sometimes it's hard, but it's meant to be that way because we are meant to learn those lessons.
I think it's just. Things are just.
Exactly. It is just. It is how it's meant to be. If your path in life is difficult, it's because it is meant to be difficult. It is because you have to learn those tough lessons. And actually, some of the strongest souls, some of the strongest people have the toughest lessons because, they have advanced to that kind of level. It's like playing a game, right? The better your player, the difficult the levels get to pass. So, it's just how it happens. If you deserve such a lesson, then you will have to learn it, whether you like it or not. And this is justice. This is justice.
And I don't think it, like, learning a lesson is necessarily can be seen as a negative thing, because some people see it as a negative thing. Learning a lesson is actually a very positive thing. And I think we all have our lessons to learn. And for all of us, they are difficult. Maybe my difficulty is not that difficult for you, or there are certain things that for me are not that difficult, but for you are very difficult, but it's my difficulty. So it's my lesson, it's what I need to learn in a like lesson in a terms of a very personal lesson in life.
Yeah.
So that's what I need to learn. And once I work hard and I learn that lesson, it's actually a good thing. It's not a punishment. It's a good thing. It means I can go up in that video game or whatever. Like I can upgrade and get to a higher level. And then I will have another difficult lesson. And then it will be that way.
So we have to actually become, welcoming to the lessons of life, because the more we run away from them, the more kind of lessons they start stacking up to the point where we actually end up failing. And it is possible to fail, I mean, it's totally possible. We can totally live our life and get to the end of it having learned nothing. And a lot of people are at that stage where they are just unwilling to learn, but they will have to, it's like, I mean, certain schools in certain countries are exactly like that. If you don't pass your exams, you stay on the same level, so you end up being this 15-year-old kid with like 10-year-olds in class, and it's embarrassing. So that's the lesson you have to, just learn, is that, it's totally embarrassing to be such an old kid with like little children, basically, right? I mean,
it is in Italy is in that way. So in Italy, if you cannot pass a number of if you're not good in some at least 4 subjects, you don't pass the thing. So even if it's 1, then you have to study the whole summer, because normally we have in Italy there are 3 months of like summer holidays. You have to spend the 3 months studying, and before it starts the new year, you need to pass that. If you don't pass it, you still have to repeat the whole year. And if you have more than 4, you have to repeat it. And there are students that have been repeating for 1, 2, 3 years, and then they just give up. And of course, I don't agree with the education system anyway, but this is a very good point, because that means that when you are a certain level, it's because you have that knowledge, rather than getting to being 18, 17 years old, and then your knowledge is actually so full of there are so many lacks of like bit important core meanings that like you don't really have any real kind of knowledge, right? You don't have it anywhere when you go to school, but generally speaking.
So I think one more point we wanted to mention is the idea of 7 virtues, because as Plato said, justice is a virtue, and there are actually 7 virtues which are opposed to the 7 deadly sins, and you can learn about that in Richard Abbott's book So Strong. There's a chapter on this topic. So in this book, Richard basically says that that justice is essentially the acceptance of cosmic laws, and that lack of justice is not injustice in the commonly known sense of the word, but an inability to see God's hand on the wheel of life. So this basically just sums up everything we were saying, that real justice is the natural cosmic laws that have been set in place by God. And this is what justice is. It's not trying to make everyone equally, successful, because that is not the case. It's about learning the lessons which we have been dealt. And it's the idea that we are always dealt the hand that we deserve.
Yeah.
And it is up to us to pass these lessons and to evolve and see those lessons as kinds of checkpoints, and pretty much the only way that our soul can evolve and move up in its journey.
Yeah, and the fact as well that, as we said before, that we need to take responsibility for our actions, because actions have consequences. And in that sense, actually, I remember Richard once talking in one of his conversations, maybe it was with you, about past lives, the fact that there is karmic justice. So even if in this life you, for your actions, because we said for each action there's a consequence. So for what you do in this life, you not necessarily will pay for the consequences maybe the day after or 10 years after, but you can actually pay for the consequences in another life. So anything that you do now can have consequences in another life.
And this clearly explains the injustice that we see in the world. You know, for example, we see there are people suffering. They shouldn't be suffering. There shouldn't be poverty. There shouldn't be war. But in the grander scale of things, it is all just, because everyone is paying off their debts from past lives. And this is the reason why we will never avoid war. We will never avoid poverty, because we are not perfect creatures, and we make mistakes, and we have to pay for them later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's why it's important to just focus on ourselves, focus on just our work, our lessons, be ready to make mistakes, new mistakes, no, to repeat the same mistakes, and learn our lessons, and understand who we are in terms of like, what is our uniqueness, what is our unique abilities, and create those opportunities in order to fulfill our purpose. So that is what is just. That's what Plato and Socrates were talking about, the just soul and the just city as a consequence. Because a just soul that works in harmony within, and that's what it's supposed to do, it's part of a community where if everybody's just in that sense, the city, the town, the world will be just.
And I think, like, on the kind of, if we were to conclude that as our blindfolds, on the kind of negative side, I would just say, you know, don't waste your time judging other people, because you will never see the whole picture. And being the kind of social justice warrior is just a completely invalid thing, because human beings are not evolved to judge anybody, and we have to really accept that. We can only attempt to judge ourselves, but ultimately it is God that decides.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the good side is just focus instead on yourself. Focus on be that just soul. Focus on understanding who you are, your body, your mind, your feeling, how to control it, what it makes you unique, what doesn't help you to grow, and learn those lessons. So that's that our kind of work about justice and understanding of justice.
Yeah, exactly. So thank you everyone for watching or listening, whatever you are doing. And we hope you enjoyed this episode, and we will see you in the next one.
Yes. Bye.